And we are back. Johnny Radio and Nathaniel Ahard counting down the top 60 albums of the 1960s as voted by you guys. And what a list it's been so far. I'm so excited. We are almost there, guys. Counting down in this episode, numbers 20 through 11. Crazy. We're there.
It almost, man, and it really. I think even if we don't love some of these albums personally in these next couple episodes, there's no denying that these are all classics, and they have the right to be on this list. And obviously, we'll discuss their rankings as we go through this episode and beyond. But can't wait to talk about these because we're really getting to the best of the best here overall.
Yeah, man, I feel like Flounder from Animal House, like when he says, "Oh boy, this is gonna be great."
I still have to see Animal House too.
Oh man,
yeah.
You're
been
gonna
on my
love
watch
that.
list a while, so
Cool, man.
sorry
Well,
guys if I offended you.
no, and sorry for the spoiler, but hey, let's not waste any time. Let's get right to it. At number 20.
Songs of Leonard Cohen, the debut album from the man himself, one of the greatest poets in history, not just in music. Really, this guy was incredible. And this is one of the greatest debut albums of all time. I mean, it is crazy how far these songs are, beyond their years. Well, then again, Cohen had to have been around his 30s at this time because he had to start as a novelist and then got his break with Columbia and made this record with some of the greatest lyrics you will ever hear on your life. This is on level with Dylan or even to a higher degree. I don't even know. It's hard to say sometimes between the two of them. But just start kicking off this thing with Suzanne, which is one of his absolute best songs, if not his best song. Just that Suzanne takes you down to her place
By the river.
and just that really like dry not necessarily monotone voice, but there's something so unique about Leonard Cohen's delivery, just like Dylan, that just draws you in to what he's saying, and obviously he could say words better than anybody in the world. But just how he likens this platonic love to something as holy as the love of Jesus Christ is really incredible. And he does this throughout this album and throughout his career. Obviously, you have the song Sisters of Mercies, which he's kind of like relegating these prostitutes to kind of like these nuns as kind of like these holy guides to kind of help you through the night. And of course, I love that line where it's like, we weren't lovers like that, then again it would still be all right. Talking to the next guy who comes and spend the night with the Sisters of Mercy. Absolutely brilliant. And then of course you have the Master song, which is just, really sexual leverage in the most unique situation, or you just see the sexual dynamic in that song displayed so well and so poetically. It is just absolutely brilliant. Of course, So Long Marianne is yet again, I think, probably top 2 Leonard Cohen songs, and really the most catchy song on this entire album. That's So Long Marianne, with the choir in the background, and really some of his most brutal lyrics I've ever heard, and just talking about this relationship that kind of fell apart. But really, it just was such a beautiful sentiment all throughout the track. And of course, Hey, That's No Way to Say Goodbye. The lyrics on this thing are just absolutely nuts from top to bottom. And I'm probably not even mentioning all the songs here, but really almost I think every single one really in its own way is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I haven't listened to many of his albums, but from what I've heard, I would probably say it is his best, and a lot of people would probably agree with that. And as you said, one of the greatest debut albums. And yeah, just for the first 2 tracks alone, Suzanne, it's one of those songs that just sucks you in and hypnotizes you. And
Yeah,
same with Master Song, that arpeggiated guitar riff is just incredible, man. Like nothing sounds like it. And it's a long song at like clocking in, I think right at 6 minutes, but it's like one that I think could go on longer and I'd still be along for the ride. Like just the way he ends every verse with wine and bread, like with that creepy
Yeah.
voice, it's so great, man. And yeah, absolutely stoked that it made it this high on the list.
Yeah, I think it should even be higher. I think this should be in the top 15, but obviously 20 is no spot to slouch at either. So
Mhm.
really, so happy this classic is this high on the list. It absolutely deserves to be here.
Yeah, man. Awesome. So now at number 19, A Love Supreme by John Coltrane from 1965. Many would say this is his masterpiece, and it's hard to argue. It's not my personal favorite. I actually like Blue Train and Giant Steps better. This is my personal third favorite of his, but it's definitely a beautiful, just you can tell, very heartfelt record that the story goes that this is his open letter to God, basically. And I think his only um, album where there's actually some vocals on it, the little chant of "A love supreme, a love supreme," which kind of follows that bass riff, which is again, I'm going to use the word hypnotic, and definitely, Coltrane is a master of his instrument. To me, though, it's not as easy to get into, as far as um, if you're new to jazz, especially. Like this one took a few listens for it to grow on me, because it's I don't know, it's just not as catchy to me. And I think I even heard there's a movie, Mr. Holland's Opus, where Richard Dreyfuss is, there's a line in there where he's talking about this Coltrane album, and I believe he's referring to A Love Supreme, and how he lambasted it at first and said, like, I don't even know what notes he's playing, but then he learned to love it. And I can see how that would happen for a lot of people on this one. And maybe eventually I will love it even more, but definitely deserves its place on the list.
Yeah, I mean, it made my list. I'd probably put it. It was near the bottom. Sorry if you guys think that's a little too low, but obviously you knew it was going to be on the list. This is considered Coltrane's best record, and it's my second favorite Coltrane album after Giant Steps. This is an absolute classic, and really one of the greatest spiritual journeys I've ever heard put to record. I mean, you hear acknowledgement, with the gong coming in right at the beginning, and you know that this is something different for
Mhm.
John Coltrane here, and and obviously the vocals add quite a bit to it. But you really see his kind of quest for God unfold through these tracks, like in Resolution, where he's like learning more and just kind of like coming to what he needs to be for God. And then you have Personance, which you really like see him kind of discovering all this stuff and learning and just storing this knowledge. And then you get to the Psalm, which, I mean, as a legend has it, but really actually it basically is confirmed fact, because on the back of the cover, basically Coltrane wrote like this poem to God, and what he did in the
Right.
studio was he played that poem. He accentuated those notes with his saxophone, and
Right.
he's basically speaking this poem through his music. And I've never
Amazing.
heard anything so beautiful. And just what a way, like knowing that and like reading the lyrics. I mean, obviously it's a little hard to follow because you aren't hearing the words, but man, you feel it. It is just an incredible piece when it comes to mood. Really one of the greatest achievements in Coltrane's discography, and obviously I see why this is such a heralded record. So yeah, it had to be on the list, and I'm fine with it at this spot because I kind of figured it would be around this area anyway.
Yeah, and glad to see Coltrane joining the Two Timers Club on the
Once
list.
again,
So awesome. So now at number 18,
the Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society. by the Kinks, the fourth Kinks album on this list, and unfortunately the last. But I mean, what do you really need? You know, this is their best record. This should even be a little higher. This is one of the greatest albums of all time. There is not a sloucher on this entire record. Just from the opening title track, Village Green Preservation Society, with the "We Are the Village Green Preservation Society. God bless Donald Duck, vaudeville and variety." Like, you already get that amazing Ray Davies sense of wit, but also just what a beautiful melody and such a great pop song, and really sets you into the themes of this album, because really this is Ray Davies looking back at the childhood he grew up in England in the 1940s, and remembering the characters that passed through his life, or maybe certain events that happened to him, and him kind of reminiscing on them. And I think that nothing shows that better than "Do You Remember Walter," the second track on this thing. Where he's talking about his friend Walter, who, you know, they felt like they could conquer the world together. They were inseparable. But as time dictated it, they kind of drifted apart, and now they have nothing to relate to with each other. And it's just such a heartbreaking song, because, I mean, how many times have we seen this happen in our lives, especially where I'm at? I'm almost 23 years old, and this has happened quite a few times already. And just that line, you know, really spoke to me more than any other Kinks song, where he says, friends change, or but memories of people still remain. I mean, what a profound line.
Great line. Really, and I love how he says Walter. Just
Walter. You remember Walter? And there's something so I guess quirky about this, as you'd expect from the Kinks, but it's so innovative at the same time. So many great songs. Picture Book, going through the picture book.
So catchy, man.
It is just that picture book, pictures of your mama. It really get all these songs. It's so, like, how are these songs not big hits? Because they're all just such great pop tunes. Johnny Thunder's another one, which they stole the riff from the song The Who did, and put it in Go to the Mirror, which obviously, because Pete Townsend is a huge Kinks fan and really respects Ray Davies a great deal as a songwriter. And of course, you have songs like The Last of the Steam Powered Trains, which is another
a great one, man. Yeah,
that rollicking beat, just the way it builds up, and that Pete quick bass on the do 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 do, and just amazing. Big Sky is, like, I guess basically an atheism song, a kind of a parody. Everybody looked up to the big sky, and he's like Ray Davies spoken word thing, Sitting by the Riverside with the Mellotrons going crazy. Just so beautiful, but so unsettling at the same time. But one of the standouts on here. And obviously Animal Farm is my favorite track on here, and really so beautiful. Just that line where it's like, she is by my side, she is safe from harm. It is just absolutely a beautiful sentiment, just talking about, where people are real people, not just playing. There's no sense of fallacy on the farm with these animals, and just these two people sharing this very intimate day with one another. Absolutely brilliant, and one I probably relate to the most. And then, of course, Village Green, the other title track, which is so great, with the harpsichord underneath, talking about the Daisy and how she married Tom, who's now the grocer, and just them kind of talking about people coming to the Village Green, and kind of like, kind of turning into this tourist thing, because he's from there. And it's so brilliant. And Starstruck was the title to my senior thesis film, and really one of the best pop songs ever. And I was saying it should be in a movie, and of course Edgar Wright had the right sense to use it in Last Night in Soho, which was perfectly. And then Phenomenal Cat, another one, so trippy with the Mellotrons going nuts, and Mick Avery's drumming is so great throughout this whole thing. I could go on and on about this record, but really this is one of the greatest albums of all time, one of the strongest albums thematically, in the Kinks' best album. You guys, if you haven't heard this, please go check it out. But considering it's this high on the list, I assume that most of you have already.
Yeah, and I do think it's definitely their best of the 60s. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, I like Lola versus Power Man a little bit more from the 70s, but their output was just so strong from mid 60s all the way through they're just one of the best, man. And it's so good to see him yet again 4 times on the
Dude,
list.
really. And I think that goes to show one of the greatest runs. I'd put him up there with the Beatles and Pink
Mhm.
Floyd, even. I mean, really, just that stretch of albums is
They're
so
so
consistent.
underrated as a band, and historically when you compare to other bands like that. But yeah, Ray and the guys are one of the best. So great pick, guys. This is awesome so far. So now at number 17, Bringing It All Back Home by Bob Dylan. Absolute classic from 1965. The album where he went electric with Subterranean Homesick Blues. Just one of the greatest songs of his whole catalog. I just love, I mean, it's 2.5 minutes long, but it's just blistering and awesome. And one of the first memorable, way before MTV days, videos of him, with holding the lyrics and throwing the cards as they go. It's so classic. But how it starts with that. Johnny's in the basement,
Mixing on the medicine. I'm on the pavement,
thinking
about
about
the
the
government.
government. Yeah, it's so great, man. Every single lyric is brilliant. And then you've got She Belongs to Me, which is an awesome ballad. Which I believe that's the one that has the lyric, She Don't Look Back, which ended up
Yeah.
being a title of one of his documentaries about him. Maggie's Farm is a classic rocker. Love Minus Zero, No Limit, another great ballad on here. And then, of course, on the B side, you've got Mr. Tambourine Man. You've got It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding, which is incredible. And It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, which I think is right up there with Desolation Row as one of his best album closers. And he had 2 amazing albums in 1965. This was the first one. But man, if you were not sure if Bob Dylan was an amazing, not just singer songwriter, but musician, artist in general, this is a great place to start.
Dude, and also one of the funniest albums I've ever heard in my life, especially the first side. Those songs are hysterical. I mean, even songs like on Subterranean Homesick Blues, the pumps don't work because the vandals took the handles.
Yeah,
It's just so classic. And She Belongs to Me, what a beautiful song. But one of my favorite Dylan, and just the fact that it's like he's saying she belongs to him, but
Mhm.
really he belongs to her. It's very, very ironic, and that's
Yeah.
why it's so brilliant. But I love that line. She's a hypnotist collector, and you're a walking antique. Doon, 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 doon. I
Yeah.
mean, just amazing. Maggie's Farm, yet again, another great one, which a lot of people think he's talking about the folk community. I'm not going to work on Maggie's Farm no more. And really the song that he played at the Newport Folk Festival, and he was booed off the stage, and he said, "Thank you." So really,
Right.
really a pivotal moment in history and in
Mhm.
music with this song at that festival. But just I really love On the Road Again, which is one of the funniest songs about living with your in-laws.
Mhm.
There's so many great lines where he's talking about everybody fighting, and it's like then the mailman comes in, he has to pick a side.
Yeah, right.
It's just absolutely hysterical. And Bob Dylan's 115th Dream is just absolute surrealism at its finest and most hysterical. Him
Yeah.
going on the what is it, the Mayflower with Captain Ahab, it's
Yeah,
just
right.
and them carrying harpoons in the streets. It's just absolutely bonkers. But
Mhm.
really I love how the second side, because the first side's all electric folk rock songs, and the second side he dials it back, just brings in that acoustic and kicking it off with Mr. Tambourine Man. I mean, come on. It's one of the strongest melodies that Dylan has ever crafted. It is one of his most hypnotizing, tantalizing songs ever. Take me for a trip upon your magic swirling ship.
Mhm.
I love that line. So let's dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free. I mean, there's so many beautiful lines that are just so I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Stream of consciousness.
Mhm.
But it is just one of his absolute best songs, and obviously so great that the Byrds even covered it and made their own iconic version, which is also considered one of the best songs. But I think that this is even better. You got 5 verses here or more, and it also is one of his best songs, easily the highlight on this record. I'm actually, not as huge on It's All Over Baby Blue, but it's really strong melody. I really love It's All Right Mom, Only Bleeding. Like the amount of lyrical content he packs into 7 minutes and the political statements he makes on that song are just so brilliant and astute.
Yeah.
Really shows that he's the best songwriter ever. And this was just the beginning to really one of the best runs. If he didn't already have a great run already with his just primarily folk-based music. But
Right.
this really is when he changed the game and really changed history. So
Oh,
I'd put it lower, but I
absolutely.
get why it's here at number 17 on this list.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect placing for it. So yeah, man, awesome guys. So now at number 16, Led Zeppelin from 1969, the debut album, another one of the greatest debut albums of all time. And the first time we're seeing Zeppelin here on the list. So I'm psyched. And man, I love every track on this record. Good times, bad times, starting it off in a very triumphant way. John Bonham's fills just taking it to the next level. And of course, I mean, Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, just one of the greatest bands as far as individual musicians alone. But together, they just create this force of nature, even on ballads like Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, which they kind of transformed from an old folk tune into this huge, just monster of a chorus. And Robert Plant just shrieking over it, incredible. And of course, they took a lot of these older blues songs, made them their own, like You Shook Me and I Can't Quit You, Baby, which are both Willie Dixon tunes. I actually like the version of I Can't Quit You, Baby that they do on the last album that they released. It's a different version, but this one is great as well. But for me, Dazed and Confused, that was the song that got me into Zeppelin to begin with. Just incredible. They also did not write this tune, but totally made it their own. I mean, with Jimmy Page playing his guitar with a violin bow, and just that amazing descending bass line by John Paul Jones. The B-side, Your Time Is Gonna Come, starting it off very cool with those organs, and going straight into Black Mountainside, this really cool little acoustic instrumental. Of course, you got Communication Breakdown, How Many More Times to end it. But yeah, just an amazing debut from this band that I'm sure at the time that these guys came on the scene, it was just like, what just happened? It must have seemed like an explosion in the sky, like the album cover. So for that reason, I definitely give a thumbs up to it being this high on the list.
So this is one of the albums I was referring to that I don't quite love, but how dare I argue the merits of Led Zeppelin? Look, I mean, this
Yes,
is a
how dare
really
you?
this is a really damn good album. That's why I'm saying, like, it's not my personal favorite, but I understand why it's here. But really, just starting off from Good Times, Bad Times, it's just that guitar. I mean, it really is such a catchy Zeppelin song. I think, I mean, what a way to introduce you to this band. I mean, what a great way to kick off this album. And obviously, Dazed and Confused is really the centerpiece of this album. Just absolutely incredible. And I mean, how can you not listen to this album and not think Jimmy Page is one of the greatest guitarists of all time?
Yeah.
He really is the standout of this record. And I think the reason Led Zeppelin really took off and didn't sink like a Led Zeppelin, which was, what Keith Moon, the drummer of the Who, said to them,
Yeah.
and that's how they came up with the name. And obviously the album cover says everything. One of the most iconic album covers of all time. How can you not love it? So great that it was even riffed upon in Borat 2, which was like one of the best jokes in that movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I mean, this is a hard rock classic. And I think, introduction to one of the greatest bands of all time. But obviously, lyrically, it's not, really there 100%. And I think that's probably my biggest problem with Zeppelin just in general. But obviously, you got to love Zeppelin. I mean, as you said, as a unit, they were just unlike any other. And I think right up there with The Who is one of the greatest bands just in general.
Yeah, and I just have to say one more time, John Bonham, man,
Yeah.
his fills that he does on Dazed and Confused like melted my brain the first time I heard him, and yeah, just that middle section where it really amps up with that other riff. It's just, for people, whether you're into hard rock or not, this is they're just indisputably one of the absolute best to ever do it. So great pick, guys. So now at number 15.
Blonde on Blonde by Bob Dylan. This album to me, honestly, the first two sides better than Highway 61. Obviously nothing better
Wow.
than Like a Rolling Stone, and nothing better than the opening or closer of that album. But I think once you get to the third side, it really kind of gets bogged down by its length. Especially when I get those Sad-Eyed Ladies of the Lowlands, is really I just kind of trail off and get bored. So I don't quite love this album, actually, believe it or not, but
Mhm.
it's certainly great. It's a classic, so I didn't have it on my list, but I completely get why it's this high. I mean, as I said, about the first two sides alone, just starting off with Rainy Day Women numbers 12 and 35. What a great title, but what
Such
a
a
great
fun
song.
song. Yeah.
And one of his most interesting musically with the horn section and then the harmonica going, and it's like everybody must get stoned. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
With all
what
the
a
people
great,
in the background, it's just
right.
like, it's so
Yes, they
fun.
will.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
a classic Dylan song. Amazing trippy lyrics. Really puts you right in the mood to smoke a doobie and listen to this song and get
Yeah.
stoned. Um, and of course, I mean, so many great songs on here. One of Us Must Know Sooner or Later is really just beautiful melody. I want you so bad. Just his delivery on here. This is like the most Dylan delivery I've ever heard on any Dylan album. Just a really exaggerated sense of delivery is so great. And especially Stuck Inside a Mobile with the Memphis Blues again is one of his funniest songs. Such a great painting of all these surreal events. Now Shakespeare, he's in the alley, like, talking to some French girl who says she knows me well. I mean, so
Yeah.
many great lyrics. And of course, you have that great, talking about, the debutante says, she knows what you need, babe, but I know what you want. Absolutely brilliant. And of course, leopard skin pillbox hat is another one. It's just absolutely hysterical, talking about this, how everybody's so enamored with this hat. It's just absolute parody and a hoot at that. And of course, I mean, Just Like a Woman is absolutely beautiful. She talks just like a woman, all those sort of things, but she breaks just like a little girl. But
Mhm.
really, I mean, the best song on here, and one of Dylan's absolute masterpieces, is Visions of Johanna, which features some of his greatest lyricism and some of his
Yeah.
most vivid pictures that he creates. Like lights flicker on the opposite loft, in the room where the heat pipes just cough.
Cough. Yeah.
And but there's nothing really to turn off. I mean, just such a beautiful line. But of course, you have great lines like, "And the ghost of electricity howls in the
House of the
bones of her
bones of her
face."
face.
Like, who
Yeah.
comes up with this stuff? I
Classic.
mean, just this is proof that I mean, this is Dylan at his peak songwriting, no question about it. Just the lyricism is so surreal, so hysterical, so beautiful. Everything about, and of course, the museum where Infinity goes up on trial. I mean, there's so many beautiful lyrics of the song, and all in the guise of him just trying to, get over this girl, and realizing that these visions of Johanna still mar his mind.
Mhm.
Really, I mean, one of the greatest songs ever, period. In really a great double album, really the first one in rock music, because nobody was really doing double LPs. All the albums would be like usually under 40 minutes, unless you were Dylan and made Highway 61, which is over 50. But
Yeah.
really, this is so groundbreaking. I think so many other artists and bands follow suit. Obviously, we saw with the Beatles, the White Album a couple years later. And also, as we were mentioning in a few episodes before, the genesis of really one of the definitive bands of the 60s, the band, you know, playing as the Hawks on this as backup band, and they play behind him so well. Really, this is such a monumental double album, whether you love it or not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I couldn't agree more that you know, the first album is the one that has all the good stuff. The second one does lose its way a little bit, even though you know, you got Fourth Time Around and Sad Eyed Lady of
Yeah.
the Lowlands, as long as it is, has a certain charm to it as well. But yeah, I definitely think the first one is stronger, and Visions of Johanna is also my favorite track on here. I think it's just brilliant.
How can
And
it not? You know.
yeah, but yeah, it's groundbreaking. Maybe not one of the best double albums of all time, but certainly one of the best of the 60s, and makes sense that it's this high. So now, folks, at number 14,
The Velvet Underground, Nico, the third album from the Velvet Underground, and really, I think one of the few groups on here that has every single album from the 60s represented on this list. And I think this one certainly is their best, and it's not hard. One of the most influential albums ever. I mean, without this, we wouldn't have garage rock, we wouldn't have alt rock, we wouldn't have art rock, we wouldn't have experimental rock, we wouldn't have noise rock. There's so many boxes this thing ticks off, and the fact that it only sold like 30,000 copies originally is just absolutely blasphemous. And just going back and digging through the crates and seeing how influential this is. And there's that famous Brian Eno quote where he said, you know, there was only sold like 30,000 copies, but everybody who bought a copy of this started a rock band. And I think listening to something like this, you'd want to, especially opening from Sunday morning with the chimes coming in, that dun, 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 dun. One of the most beautiful songs about paranoia I've ever heard in my life. And then that goes right into I'm Waiting for the Man, which, I mean, further proof what Lou Reed could do with 2 or 3 chords, but just the storytelling here about this guy going to see his heroin dealer. I mean, this is why this album failed, because Lou Reed was really pushing the envelope, as he always did in his career. But really, he did it when it counted here, and talked about like stuff like sadomasochism on Venus and Furs, which has John Cale doing that viola, that ding ding. I mean, amazing song. And then you have songs like Femme Fatale with Nico on vocals, obviously, because she was one of the girls in Andy Warhol's troupe, and obviously went on to have her own career, a very successful one in her own right. But this was her debut album as well. And Femme Fatale is so beautiful. And then, of course, you have Run, 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 another song about drug use and, you know, absolute, you know, decrepacy.
What is Heroin about, might I ask?
I think you have to listen to it, and we'll tell you. No, but really, I mean, Heroin, I think is the greatest song Lou Reed ever wrote. And because it's what's so amazing is he's not condoning heroin, he's not condemning it, he's just giving you how it feels. And it is just so chaotic by the end, you know, especially with Mo Tucker almost losing her sense of drumming on the song by the end. But I think it works all the more for it. Really one of the greatest sonic masterpieces, once again, with Sister Ray, like we were talking about a few episodes ago. This is a masterpiece in songwriting. And then you can go from something like There She Goes Again to I'll Be Your Mirror, which is like crazy, the amount of musical diversity on this thing. And it sounds so grimy and so disgusting. The mix, it's so muddy, and usually that would turn me off, but I think for this band it absolutely works, because it absolutely nails the tone they're going for. And I even love, you know, European Sun, another great instrumental. This is just one of the greatest albums of all time, and honestly, I'd put it at this exact spot on my list, but considering a couple things I know are above it, I would probably place it a bit higher. And just
I know you would, yeah. But I know a lot of people agree, and yeah, I mean, it's my favorite album of theirs as well. And yeah, just like you said, for the diversity alone, I appreciate it that much more. Heroin, yeah, absolutely a standout, and I love I'm Waiting for the Man. It's like, it's just got that that groove like that, it's so catchy, even with the subject matter, $26 in my
In my hand, and
hand.
just that
So
Lou
great.
Reed delivery. I
Yeah,
love it's like he's never early, he's
he's
always
always
late.
late. Yeah.
If you're going, you'll
You
have to
got to
wait.
wait. Yeah,
And
so
he's all
fun.
dressed in black. Like the
Yeah.
way he delivers the lines, it
Yeah.
really just so iconic and really. I mean, this album is the definition of iconic. I mean, just look at the album cover,
Hmm.
drawn
Oh
by
yeah,
Andy
one of the
Warhol.
most
There,
iconic covers of all time.
the banana. You
Yeah,
can't
man.
beat it. Really, this is a great spot for this album, and
Yeah.
yeah, can't argue it at all.
All right, guys. So now at number 13, Led Zeppelin 2, also from 1969. And now, like Velvet Underground, we have all of Zeppelin the 60s albums accounted for, the only two there. But great follow up to their debut. I mean, just the opening track alone, Whole Lot of Love, one of their greatest of all time. I mean, it's such a simple guitar riff, but it's one that is just brilliant by Jimmy Page. And then, of course, you have that whole midsection that just sounds like Robert Plant is like having an orgasm over these weird drum sounds. And then, but then when it comes back in, it's one of the coolest guitar solos of all time with that dun, dun, with and yeah,
Ah,
you know it in your mind, and then the outro. It's just one of the greatest rock songs of all time. And then What Is and What Should Never Be, a really cool song written by Page and Plant. They're kind of spreading their wings a bit more songwriting wise on this album with songs like Thank You, Heartbreaker, another really cool iconic guitar riff by Page there, and his guitar solo is just nuts on that one. It's so cool. Of course, you got Ramble On, Bring It On Home, which again is them transforming an old Willie Dixon song. You've even got Moby Dick, an instrumental with Bonham taking over the charge on that one, and the Lemon Song, a really cool remake of an old blues tune as well. But really, the only weak track on here, I think, is Living Loving Maid. She's just a woman. I'm not crazy about that one. But overall, it's a really strong second outing by one of the greatest bands ever.
absolutely. I think I've always loved that song though. Isn't that
Oh, yeah.
weird? Yeah.
The Living Loving Maid.
Yeah, I think it's really catchy. But
Yeah.
really, I mean, it's so great to be talking about Led Zeppelin looking like a person at a Led Zeppelin concert. But really, I mean,
Yeah, you do.
this is actually my favorite Led Zeppelin album.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this dude, when I heard this thing, it blew my mind. I just from the opening track with a whole lot of love.
Yeah.
You need cooling, baby. I'm not fooling. Just Robert Plant. I mean, we haven't talked enough about Robert Plant, one
Yeah,
of the
dude.
greatest singers of all time.
Yeah.
It's so iconic.
He
that
is my
voice.
favorite singer of all time, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, I guess I can't argue that. I'd probably have him a bit lower, but he's got to be at least in the top 20. I mean, come on. I mean, Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin, man.
Yeah.
But this song is one of their best. I also really love that really psychedelic breakdown in the middle with John Bonham. The fills he's doing is just absolutely nuts once again. But yet again, Jimmy Page is the star of that song with Plant. Lemon Song is also great. Watch the juice drip down my leg. You got those euphemisms in there.
Right.
Absolutely incredible. Heartbreaker yet again is another just it's so catchy. And then of course Ramble On is one of the greatest bass lines of all time from John Paul Jones. That boom boom
Yeah.
I mean, how can you not love this stuff? I mean, this is hard rock at its best, man. I would have this a bit lower, probably around the 25 range. But come on, I mean, this is an absolute classic. I wouldn't have it above the Velvet Underground and Nico, mind you. But
Right.
certainly I get its place on this list, and you got to have it on here. It's really, I still think Zeppelin's best record for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I wouldn't rank it that high with Zeppelin, but certainly, I mean, these first two records out of the gate were just so amazing and so influential. And the turns they would take in the 70s, I think, lend themselves to even more variety of sound and uh, developing those songwriting skills even more by Robert Plant. But yeah, like, just what he really goes for it as a vocalist, on Whole Lot of Love, especially. But just those the little things that he does that you don't always even think about, like in between the lyrics, is what I love about him, and he really shows that on this record even more so than the first one. So great job, guys. So now at number 12.
Electric Ladyland by the Jimi Hendrix Experience, the second appearance of Jimi Hendrix on this list. And I'm not surprised that this is high, or that it's this high, because this is one of the greatest albums ever made. One of the greatest double albums of all time. The soundscapes Hendrix explores on this, I can't even fathom how he came up with this. This is what I love about Hendrix, how he took blues rock and elevated it to something, I mean, we couldn't even comprehend really, and how he influences, or he puts in those elements of jazz and psychedelia, which, I mean, come full first, even just from "And the Gods Made Love," that opening track. It's only a minute, but it's so trippy, so fuzzed out, and that goes right into "Have You Ever Been to Electric Ladyland," which is such a great song with a killer groove to get you into it. Man, there's not a single weak track on this entire album. I may not love every song on here, but there's not anything that I consider weak on here. Even Little Miss Strange, I love. The guitar work from Jimmy on that is just absolutely out of this world. Yet again, the greatest guitarist of all time. And of course, I mean, so many other great songs on here. Rainy Day, Dream Away, which obviously get a reprise to, which I love how it adds to kind of like this cohesiveness of this really expansive, massive record. And of course, you have some of his greatest sonic achievements, like 1983, A Merman I Shall Turn to Be, which I still think is one of the greatest songs of all time. Not something I'm going to spin a lot, but I think just an absolute masterpiece on its own. The way like him and Mitch Mitchell recreate the sounds of the ocean with their instrument, and the fact he's playing bass on this. No Redding wasn't even there.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you not love that?
And the fact that Voodoo Child, the one that's also a very long track, it's just a jam basically, and it's, oh my god, just mind-blowing. Some of the stuff he's doing live in studio with, I believe, Steve Winwood's playing keys on that performance, and they just captured it in studio, like, just amazing. And then Burning of the Midnight Lamp is a really cool tune that he's using the wah guitar to just an amazing effect on. Like you said, there's not a weak track on here, but I mean, what a way to end the album with All Along the Watchtower, just one of the greatest cover songs ever of Bob Dylan's.
The greatest Dylan cover for sure.
Yes.
No question about it.
Oh,
so good
absolutely.
that Dylan plays it that way in concert.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hendrix.
That's absolutely right. And like his solos on that are just like some of the most incredible guitar melodies that you could ever hear on tape. And then after that, Voodoo Child Slight Return, just one of the wildest, crazy, like, I don't even know how Mitch Mitchell keeps up with the stuff he's doing. And then in the studio, like having the guitar pan from left to right, it's just amazing, man. One of the coolest riffs too, opening up that song.
Right.
And
then of course you have like standing next to a mountain, chop it down with the edge of my hand. It's
so cool.
So cool, man. And just that classic Hendrix voice. I mean, this really is just one of the most mind-blowing records I've ever heard in my life. I think that's probably the best word for it. Yeah. It is an experience like no other, no pun intended. But really, I mean, when you talk about double albums, this is what people talk about as being the standard. It might not be the absolute best double album. Sorry, it's not even number one on this list. But even so, I mean, it is an absolute classic, and I think deserving to be at around This, yet again, I wouldn't have it above Kingston Village Green Preservation Society or Velvet Underground, but I mean, it's kind of at this point, it's kind of a toss up with these spots.
Yeah, I think Barbara's going to be upset that it's not in the top 10, but what are you going to do?
Or
Shout
number
out.
one. Hey, sorry, man.
Yeah, but hey, this is not a bad spot for it, absolutely, and deserves to be this high. So now, folks, at number 11, The Doors, the debut album from 1967, another one of the greatest debut albums of all time. I mean, Jim Morrison and the gang breaking on through to the other side, right off the jump with that amazing song. And, it's just 2.5 minutes of just awesome psychedelic rock with Robbie Krieger doing some really cool stuff on the guitar. I think he's one of the most underrated guitarists of all time. But break on through to the other side. So intense. I love it. Going straight into Soul Kitchen, which has got a great keyboard riff by Ray Manzarek. Then you got The Crystal Ship, which is just a beautiful piano ballad with Jim doing his kind of lounge lizard thing that he does so well. But I mean, you've also got Light My Fire, one of their most known tracks. And even though I feel sometimes the song goes on a little longer, I like the edited version a bit better. It's no question. It's one of the greatest songs that they ever wrote. Backdoor Man, I even love their cover of that. End of the Night is really cool and has this kind of dark, creepy vibe to it, but none creepier than The End, and maybe their greatest song of their whole catalog. Just one of the greatest closing songs of all time that takes you on a journey that you may not even want to go on, but it's amazing. And such a great record.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on The End there. I mean, that is my favorite Doors song, and I think the best song on the song. And every time I think of the opening of Apocalypse Now with the trees, it's like, this is the end.
Oh, it's so good.
But really, I mean, this whole album, honestly, this one I would put a little lower. I don't think it should be above Velvet Underground or Electric Ladyland or Zeppelin 2, or I think this is a little overrated. Granted, because it was still on my list. It was like in the bottom 5. But obviously it's an iconic record. I do love it. And I think the best Doors record for sure. I mean, just as you said, opening with Break On Through to the Other Side, where they kind of take that riff from Ray Charles' What I'd Say, and really make it their own. And obviously 1967, the third album from just this episode, including songs of Leonard Cohen and Velvet Underground and Nico, just incredible. How much great music. And when you heard that song, Nothing Was Ever the Same Way Again, and just that Jim Morrison scowl is so powerful. What a great vocalist, what an iconic vocalist at that. 20th Century Fox, yet again, is another really cool song with a great organ riff underneath it, and really some great lyrics too, where he's talking about, I love how he's like talking about since her mind left school, and then he's like saying she doesn't waste time on elementary talk. I thought that was a pretty clever lyricism from Mr. Jim Morrison there, the Lizard King. But in Light My Fire, I mean, it could go on for like more than 7 minutes. I don't care. I get it feels a bit elongated, but man, I would take Ray Manzarek's organ solo any day of the week, or Robbie Krieger's guitar work on this track. It just absolutely draws me in, and just absolutely iconic. Nothing sounds like, nobody else sounds like these guys. Nothing sounds like this track.
Mm-hmm.
Even The Doors, just one of those bands, man, that are The Doors. But really, there's stuff on this album that doesn't really get me going, especially like the cover of the Kurt Vale and Bright Brecht thing, the Alabama Whiskey Bar, which German musicals from the 1920s, but I don't think it works completely as a song on this one.
It's really weird too that ended up like on their greatest hits compilation, which really? I found odd. Yeah,
I thought that was one of the weaker songs on the album, but hey, I mean, I just think some of the other songs on here are kind of boring. I really do love Looked at You though. That's a really catchy song. But I may disagree with you a little bit on like End of the Night take it as it comes. But Backdoor Man's also really good. Yeah, it's just the
Yeah.
opening tracks.
When
Like,
he's screaming "backdoor man" at the end, I'm your backdoor.
oh man, yeah,
It's so great,
so
man.
great.
Yeah.
But really, I think the opening track, the closing track, and I mean, just the end alone, just the journey that they take us on musically and lyrically, especially the whole Oedipus thing, is just absolutely nuts. It's like,
Yeah, it's messed up.
mother, I want to, and then he
Yeah.
just starts
Yeah.
screaming like a maniac, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't get better than that,
Yeah.
and I don't think it gets better for the Doors. Though I think it's too high on the list. I understand. It's so iconic. Just look at that album cover, and yeah, it's a classic nonetheless. Great album.
I think, yeah, I disagree. I think it's in a perfect spot. I remember seeing it kind of hovering around this low top 10,
Yeah.
high 11s for quite a while. So it ended up probably where it should be based on everyone's votes. But yeah, I'm glad it's this high. I think it's a absolute classic. And guys, we've made it to the top 10. So this is so exciting. So exciting, in fact, that I think we may have to split up the next two episode into two, where we're going to do 10 through 6 and then 5 through 1 in separate episodes, and we might even have some other special surprises for you. But before we go, we do have to make another announcement that right after the top 60 of the 60s, based on the success that we've had here so far, we're just going to keep running through, man. We're going to go to the top 70 of the 70s, and you can start sending your list now. We're going to put a deadline of May 31st on this to tabulate everything, and then hopefully roll right into the next list as soon as possible. So get your list to us the same way that you did before, either in the comments, or if you've got our info, just send it to us, whatever the easiest way is. If you want to send us a list of your favorite 70 albums, do it. If you can only muster a top 10, do that as well. But I don't see how that's possible with the 70s.
So
Absolutely,
many great records.
in my opinion, the greatest decade in music
Me too.
history. Yeah.
I'm 100% with you, John, on that, and I can't wait to. I think that one's going to even be better than this list. Sorry to toot my horn a little early, but really, I just can't wait to talk about that decade of music. But I can't wait to talk about these next 10 records, because I mean,
Yeah.
they're all great. I don't think there was any question about that. I think we love every single one of these albums, and yeah, can't wait to get into it.
Absolutely. So we will see you next week, everybody. Thank you so much again for voting and watching. And make sure to like and subscribe to both of our channels so you can keep up with all this great content. Thank you. And we'll see you then.
Take care, guys.